Ah, yes. The most interesting man in the world, the original Zaddy. You remember him? The man who could wrestle a bear with one arm and sip a Dos Equis with the other. The man who had the charm, mystery and adventure to capture our attention for over a decade. But now the question lingers. Whatever happened to the most interesting man in the world? Today, we dive into one of the most iconic marketing campaigns of all time, how it shaped a brand, captivated an audience, and ultimately, why it had to say goodbye. Let's dive in. In the mid-2000s, the beer industry was overflowing with ads that followed a familiar pattern. Slapstick humor, parties, and loud marketing aimed at younger demographics. Budweiser had its comical wass-up, and Coors Light was known for its emphasis on refreshment and laid-back vibes. It was a crowded market, and Dos Equis, a lesser-known brand in the United States at the time, needed something different, something bold. And then came the most interesting man in the world. The year was 2006, and Dos Equis made a daring move. Instead of chasing the youthful party-going crowd, they aimed higher. They introduced a character unlike any we'd seen before, the most interesting man in the world, portrayed by Jonathan Goldsmith. This wasn't your typical beer spokesperson. He wasn't chugging pints at a backyard barbecue or cracking jokes with buddies. No, this man was elegant, suave, and enigmatic. He wasn't just a man, he was a myth. What made the campaign so groundbreaking? For starters, it was rooted in storytelling. Each ad was a window into the life of a man who had seemingly done it all. Fought in underground martial arts tournaments, won Nobel Prizes, saved villages and tamed wild animals. Every commercial showcased his unbelievable, exaggerated adventures. He was larger than life, yet somehow believable enough that you couldn't help but wonder, what if? His persona was timeless. Age? Irrelevant. He was ageless in both demeanor and mystique, and let's not forget that famous tagline. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. It was more than just a tagline. It was an invitation into a world of refinement and adventure. It implied that Dos Equis wasn't just for anyone, it was for those who, like the character, sought something beyond the ordinary. This single line, delivered in a smooth, assured tone, turned into one of the most iconic phrases in modern advertising. The genius of the campaign lay in its tone. It was humorous without being slapstick. It was sophisticated without being pretentious. And most importantly, it was memorable. You could quote it, share it, laugh with it. The most interesting man quickly transcended his role as a beer spokesperson and became a cultural phenomenon. But it wasn't just Jonathan Goldsmith's portrayal that made the character so compelling. A huge part of the campaign's success was due to Will Lyman, the voice behind the ads. Lyman's authoritative and dramatic narration gave the outlandish stories an air of legitimacy, balancing the absurdity of the most interesting man's adventures with a tone that made you take it seriously, if only for a moment. Dos Equis didn't stop at just TV commercials. The campaign was brilliantly extended through social media and digital marketing long before other beer brands had caught on to the digital wave. The most interesting man wasn't just confined to a 30-second spot on television. He lived online too. His quotes, his persona, his adventures, they went viral. Memes were created. Social media posts flooded timelines, and soon even people who had never tried Dos Equis knew exactly who the most interesting man was. Fans even began to participate in the campaign. They created their own most interesting man moments, shared them on Facebook and Twitter, and built a community around this character who represented adventure, wisdom, and humor all in one. By creating a character that fans could engage with and relate to, even if aspirationally, Dos Equis had done something remarkable. They'd made a beer feel important. The results were astounding. Between 2006 and 2011, Dos Equis sales in the United States doubled. This was no small feat in a competitive market dominated by giants like Budweiser, Coors, and Heineken. What set Dos Equis apart was that it wasn't trying to be like them. Instead of positioning the beer as something for the masses, they made it feel exclusive. If the most interesting man in the world preferred Dos Equis, Wouldn't you want to drink what he drank? By 2012, Dos Equis was one of the fastest-growing beer brands in the US. The campaign had worked so well that it not only elevated the brand, but also made Jonathan Goldsmith a household name. People wanted to know more about the man behind the character. Interviews with Goldsmith revealed his own colourful life. While not quite as epic as the most interesting man's, it was still a fascinating backstory that only fueled the character's mystique. However, like all good stories, this one had an ending. In 2016, after a decade of success, Dos Equis made the bold decision to retire Goldsmith as the most interesting man. In a final fitting send-off, the character was launched into space on a one-way mission to Mars, because where else could the most interesting man go after conquering the Earth? But why retire the character at all? The decision was driven by a desire to refresh the brand and appeal to a younger demographic, millennials and Gen Z. While the most interesting man was universally admired, the campaign had been running for 10 years, and Dos Equis believed it was time for a change. To fill the shoes of Goldsmith, they brought in Augustin Legrand, a younger, more energetic version of the most interesting man. The idea was to modernize the character for a new generation, but the magic wasn't the same. Legrand's portrayal, while strong, lacked the unique charm and depth that Goldsmith brought to the role. The chemistry between Goldsmith and the audience had been built over a decade, and fans were loyal to the original. The new version of the most interesting man didn't capture the same mystique. The ads continued for a short time, but the character's cultural presence began to wane. By 2018, Dos Equis had completely moved away from the character, signaling the end of an era. Fans missed the original charm, wit and mystery that made the campaign iconic. And despite efforts to modernize, the most interesting man quietly faded into the past. But the story doesn't end there. Jonathan Goldsmith, the man behind the legend, went on to have a post-most interesting man career. After leaving Dos Equis, Goldsmith embraced his role as a cultural icon. He wrote a memoir titled, "Stay Interesting, I Don't Always Tell Stories About My Life, but When I Do They're True," offering a behind-the-scenes look at his life and his time as the most interesting man. He also continued to act, taking on roles in television and smaller ad campaigns, but it was clear that his time as the most interesting man had cemented his place in advertising history. Meanwhile, Dos Equis faced a challenge. While the campaign had run its course, they struggled to replicate the magic that the most interesting man had brought to their brand. Sales didn't continue on the upward trajectory that the campaign had sparked, and despite new ad efforts, nothing quite captured the cultural zeitgeist in the way the original campaign had. So whatever happened to the most interesting man in the world, he's still out there, in our collective memories, in viral internet memes, and in the way we talk about marketing campaigns that transcend their original purpose. While he may no longer be appearing in new commercials, his impact on the advertising world is undeniable. The most interesting man in the world wasn't just a clever campaign, it was a cultural reset. It showed marketers the power of character-driven storytelling, where a figure can embody the essence of a brand so completely that the lines between reality and fiction blur. It proved that aspiration sells, and that a product can be more than just something to consume, it can be part of a lifestyle and identity. The legacy of the most interesting man in the world offers important lessons for modern marketers. 1. Storytelling creates connection. People don't just want products, they want stories. The most interesting man was more than a spokesman. He was the embodiment of a narrative that consumers wanted to be part of. His exaggerated adventures, paired with humor and sophistication, invited people into a world where Dos Equis was the drink of the extraordinary. 2. Humor with depth. The campaign wasn't just funny, it was actually clever. The humor had layers, with subtle winks and nods to intelligence, charm and experience. It wasn't the slapstick comedy of other beer ads, but a refined humor that made you think and laugh. 3. Leverage digital platforms. Dos Equis was ahead of its time when it embraced digital marketing and social media, turning the most interesting man into a viral sensation. Memes, fan engagement and interactive content extended the campaign's lifespan and embedded the character into pop culture. 4. Know when to evolve. While Dos Equis' attempt to modernize the character wasn't as successful, their effort to evolve the brand speaks to the importance of adapting marketing strategies to meet changing demographics and cultural trends. Thanks for watching, and remember, while you may not always drink beer, when you do, stay interesting, my friends.